Across the ruins of Europe, church bells rang for peace while trains gathered women who felt none. They were auxiliaries, typists, nurses, radio operators, faces young under soot, uniforms thin from winters that never ended. They moved in silence toward boxcars that smelled of coal and fear. No one spoke of home. Home was rubble. They had been told stories. Americans were wolves who would make examples. A girl from Hamburg whispered it to anyone who would listen. Another, a searchlight veteran with cracked hands, clenched her jaw and saved her breath. Hate is lighter when you carry it quietly. The train lurched west through a landscape without corners, buildings rounded down by bombs, chimneys smoking without houses. Children waved with paper-thin hands. At night the women shared blankets and breath. Boots crunched outside, a shot cracked far away, no one asked why. Anna, once a Munich typist, wrote in a pocket diary, "We are going far. Mother will think I am dead. Perhaps I will be." The ink wandered with the rails. The page smelled of coal. She tucked it close like a passport to somewhere that still believed in words. The journey ended at shattered ports, Bremen, Le Havre, Cherbourg, where ships waited intact, carrying flags that had never burned. The women braced for spittle and blows. Instead came clipboards, pencils, quiet orders, lines that moved. Bureaucracy, not vengeance. It was colder than anger. On board, steel held stacked bunks and air thick with diesel. A mess line appeared. Onto metal trays fell bread that bounced back, stew that glistened, coffee that steamed like a memory. Some hesitated, sniffing as if poison had a smell. Others ate and hid the tears by lowering their heads to the cup. The ocean stretched like a sentence with no punctuation. Storms slapped the hull and then forgot them. They slept to the pitch and dreamt in gray. Between dreams they listened to engines that never coughed, to a ship that simply worked, an idea that felt foreign. One night Anna wrote by the glow of a contraband match. "They feed us as if we belonged to a rulebook." She did not know the word she was reaching for was Geneva. She only knew the stew sat warm in her stomach, and her doubts sat warmer. America rose clean on the horizon, skyline unbroken, cranes moving like patient birds. The Statue of Liberty watched without comment. On the pier some shouted, most only stared. The women marched ashore to the drum of their own boots. The air smelled of salt and machines that had never paused for sirens. Buses swallowed them, glass windows offering a country that seemed like a rumor, porches with paint, boys on bicycles, signs with light bulbs that all worked. Fields rolled out green as if war were a story told elsewhere. It was unbearable to look at and impossible to ignore. The camp gates loomed, towers, fences, a gate that clanged but did not sneer. Names were taken, possessions tagged, medical checks brisk and impersonal. Uniforms traded for work clothes that actually fit. The women waited for the humiliation they had rehearsed. It did not arrive. One building waited with a hiss like rain behind a wall. Delousing, they guessed. Their hearts hammered the old rhythm of dread. A guard pointed, the line moved, the tiled doorways swallowed them one by one. Inside, steam wrote on the air. A matron placed a bar of real soap into each pair of hands, heavy, square, faintly floral. Towels followed. The showerheads roared. Heat struck skin like memory, and gray rivers spiraled into the drains, carrying weeks of flight and the last fragments of certainty. Some women laughed and clapped hands to mouths, shocked at the sound. Others cried the way children do, suddenly, completely, without a plan. Hair that had forgotten to be hair loosened into itself. Life surrendered without speeches. The room smelled clean in a way the century had not. They dressed in plain garments that did not itch, and stepped back into a world that looked the same, but had moved half an inch. In the mess hall they froze again, coffee, buttered rolls, stew. The first spoonful burned tongues and used to warmth. The second tasted like survival without apology. That night Anna wrote, "We expected blows and got soap. I do not know what to do with this. She placed the diary under her pillow as if kindness might be stolen back in the dark. Morning showed a camp more tidy than terrifying. Paths were swept, barracks were numbered, rules were posted where rules belong. Guards carried rifles like tools, not trophies. The women were processed, not performed upon. It felt like being filed into a cabinet marked prisoners, a drawer that slid smoothly. Work orders arrived: kitchens, laundries, fields, depots, sewing rooms. The tasks were measured, the hours predictable. For labor they received slips of camp scrip, strange money that bought cigarettes, pencils, jam, and the most dangerous thing of all, lipstick. Letters arrived from Germany like messages washed ashore. We sleep in the cellar now. The bread line opens at dawn. Bring nothing, there is nothing to bring. The women read them over plates they struggled to finish. Shame is heavy when carried in a full stomach. Still, routine is a language the body learns first. Lice vanished. Coughs receded. Cheeks remembered how to be round. Suspicion thinned, not defeated by speeches, but eroded by breakfast served every single day. Not all guards were kind. Some stared with grief sharpened into anger. Some could not look at all. But even the hard ones obeyed the same rules as the soft. A sergeant dropped a flashlight at roll call. Anna bent, lifted, handed it back. Their fingers touched. He nodded. That tiny, ordinary gesture knifed deeper than a shout. Sundays sometimes meant a church hall in town. Volunteers ladled soup, stacked sandwiches, slid slices of pie onto plates as if sugar were a right. An old woman with flour on her apron urged, "Eat." Anna bit an apple and nearly sobbed. The clean snap was louder than any sermon. Trips beyond the wire for fieldwork felt like visiting another planet. Stores with windows unbroken. Cars that started. Movie posters that smiled in color. At a bakery door a warm smell wrapped them like a coat. They stared, mouths open, as if warmth itself were treason. Back in the barracks, the whispers changed shape. They have and they have and they have. Someone murmured. No one added. We had. That word no longer fit. The canteen took scrip with a gentle clack. A Hershey bar broke along its seam. Anna tasted childhood, and tears ran without permission. A girl from Bremen tried on lipstick like a dare and stared at herself with a look no uniform had allowed, a look that said, I am still here. The films on Saturday nights were low and bright. Cowboys galloped, comedians slipped on perfect floors. At first the women watched stiffly. Then a tune caught, and humming slipped between benches. For a minute the war stepped outside for a smoke, and nobody followed. In the laundry Anna's hands learned American names stitched into collars. She folded shirts for men she was supposed to hate, and felt only the relief of work that didn't require lies. Steam fogged the room. Soap wrote its temporary fog script on the air. For once, the story ended with clean. Yet gratitude tasted like betrayal. She ate and thought of cellars. She slept and dreamed of ruins. She woke and reached for the diary, writing sentences that argued with themselves. Bodies mended faster than beliefs. Mirrors offered faces that looked younger than the war allowed. Hair shone. Skin smoothed. Hunger edges rounded off. The proof stood inarguable in the glass. The enemy had made them healthy. Their own leaders had not. Rumors moved with the wind, repatriation lists, transfers, the long road back to rubble. Fears shifted shape. They had feared arrival. Now they feared departure. To leave meant hunger again, and the sting of being well-fed in memory. A few hoarded crusts out of habit, tucking bread beneath mattresses like a secret insurance policy. But the crusts molded uselessly. The kitchen kept opening, the bell kept ringing, the line kept moving. Reliability itself became a kind of sermon. One night Anna wrote, Hatred is simple. It is a hard room with one chair. Dignity is harder. It asks questions and refuses to leave. She closed the diary and could not sleep. Work details expanded to nearby factories and farms. The women saw grocery aisles that looked like parades, labels bright as flags. They watched a boy buy milk with coins and walk home whistling, unafraid of airplanes. The ordinary felt indecent, as if comfort were something you needed permission to witness. In the camp schoolroom, an American chaplain taught English words the mouth enjoyed: soap, towel, paycheck, bakery, church, library. The women traded them like small treasures. The chaplain learned names: Anna, Lotte, Ruth. Names said in kindness grow heavier than ranks. Some guards softened with familiarity, others hardened with memory. But the line of rules held steady. You could feel the Geneva Convention underfoot like a floor that didn't creak. After years of slogans, predictability itself felt like mercy. At lights out, a voice whispered from the next bunk. "If the enemy can be decent, what does that make us?" No one answered. The question lay on the floorboards until morning. Autumn stitched gold across the camp fence. The routine turned comfortable and therefore dangerous. Comfort tempts you to forget. Letters from home would not allow it. "We boil weeds, the bread is gray, your brother coughs, if only you could send the soap." Anna tried to write back without leaking abundance into the margins. She failed. Kindness kept seeping through the words, steam under a door. She replaced descriptions with prayers and felt both cowardly and grateful. An inspection team toured the camp and left nodding. Rules were followed, ledgers balanced, bodies mending. The women learned a new posture, standing in line without fear. Their shoulders realized how to fall an inch lower. The small relief felt like betrayal and blessing in a single breath. At the canteen, a soldier paid for a chocolate he did not take and said, "For your mother when you go back." Anna could only nod. Later she hid the bar inside her diary like a second heart. Winter arrived as rumor became orders. Names were posted for transport. The notice fluttered like a bird that couldn't decide whether to leave. Women gathered beneath it, counting letters and syllables, measuring hope by alphabet. Anna's name lay in the middle, spelled correctly. She stared until the letters blurred. The camp that had been a cage now felt like a harbor. Leaving meant entering the storm again with a stomach that remembered comfort. On the last Sunday, the chaplain opened the chapel to anyone who wished to sit in quiet. Americans came, Germans came, some prayed, some didn't. A guard played an old hymn on a battered upright. The room did not agree about God, but it agreed about silence. That evening the barracks traded keepsakes: a pencil stub, a ribbon, a pocket mirror, a word pronounced properly. Anna pressed her soak, still faintly floral, into Lotte's palm. "For when the pipes freeze," she said. Lotte nodded and did not trust herself to speak. The truck waited at dawn, engine muttering steam. Frost stitched the fence bright. The gate yawned. Women climbed up with packages wrapped in brown paper and string, the way hope is always wrapped. The guard who had dropped his flashlight once checked names with a voice that tried for neutral and landed on kind. The road back ran past everything that had not been bombed. Stores breathed warm air onto sidewalks. A boy threw a newspaper and missed. He laughed and tried again. The truck turned toward the railhead. The depot smelled of wood and coffee. The Americans had even swept the platform. Anna opened her diary to a blank page and found herself afraid to write. Words would make leaving permanent. She finally managed. "I feared going more than I feared coming." She closed the book and held it like a passport once more. The train moved east. Fields blurred. The women watched America withdraw like a tide that had been gentle and was therefore dangerous. Days later Europe returned, bridges down, roofs gone, chimneys standing like teeth. Stations without glass breathed winter through their ribs. People on platforms looked older than their ages, a nation of faces carved by shortages. Repatriation officers processed the women with the same pencils that had once recorded their capture. Forms stamped, rations issued, train vouchers handed out. The system worked because it had to. Mercy was a ledger with margins too thin. Anna stepped into what had been home and found the scale all wrong. Streets were narrower, sky lower, the air smoky with fires meant to warm and only succeeding at remembering. Her mother's arms felt like a rescue and a question. That night she set the diary on the table and unwrapped the chocolate bar. She broke it into 4 pieces and placed one on each plate. No one spoke until the last square was gone. Then her mother asked the softest question. "Tell me everything." Anna told the truth by inches. Soap first, then stew, then wages that bought a pencil, a letter, a prayer. She did not know how to explain Geneva in a house with a roof that whistled. She chose small details that felt like hands, the nod of a guard, the hymn in a chapel, the apple that cracked like hope. Neighbors came to listen, part envy, part hunger, part disbelief. Some called it propaganda staged for returning prisoners. Others, quieter, said nothing and looked at their children as if deciding to believe would feed them. In the months that followed, Normal tried to grow. It sprouted thin and often died. Anna found work mending clothes for families who had fewer clothes than stories. She kept the diary inside a drawer with a good spoon and the last photograph. Sometimes at the public pump she smelled soap from someone else's bucket and felt tears strengthen, not weaken, her spine. Clean is a promise, she thought, not a luxury. Years would pass before Anna understood the shape of what captivity had done. It had not erased the bombs or the graves. It had not turned enemies into saints. It had done something smaller and therefore harder to undo. It had taught her that power constrained by rules feels like mercy to the weak. She kept a bar of American soap long after it turned yellow and lost its scent. When she married, she moved it with the carefulness of a relic. When her daughter asked why, Anna said, "Because once I learned that the sky could be warm." On anniversaries of the war's end she rang no bell. She cleaned the kitchen slowly, listening to water fall obediently from a tap that worked. Then she opened the diary to the page where the ship had first hummed and read the shaky line, "We expected blows and got soap." The sentence still fit. And somewhere, in a country that had once been the enemy, another woman might be writing her own sentence about a kindness that refused to be forgotten. Spring tried to speak in the ruined city with shy green at the curb and a bird bold enough to sing from a broken gutter. Anna hung laundry on a line strung between 2 walls that didn't agree on standing. The sheets lifted like flags of truce. Neighbors traded yeast, news, rumors about ration cards, and stories that ended with soft apologies. A knock brought a parcel from the church, powdered milk, a tin of cocoa, a booklet in careful German explaining calories and cleanliness. The pamphlet's diagrams of hand-washing made someone laugh and then cry. Habit reached for cold water, memory reached for hot. Anna boiled, cooled, and taught the street's children to scrub palms, knuckles, thumbs. They learned quickly because children are built to live. In the evening she opened the diary and copied a camp recipe for stew into the margin. Ratios, not miracles. "We make do and we make clean," she wrote. It felt like a prayer no one had to agree about. The first American relief truck to reach her block brought flour and questions. A young officer with a map asked for a halt to measure, a list to start, a line to form. The grown-ups watched his pencil more than his smile. Order felt like a foreign language you could learn if you wanted to eat. Bread rose in borrowed ovens. Children sat cross-legged for a lesson on soap and boiling water, the officer speaking through a pastor who knew enough English to bridge the nouns. Anna stood at the back and nodded at each sentence that matched what she had lived. Later she walked home with a sack lighter than she wished and heavier than yesterday. A neighbor muttered that charity is a chain. Anna said nothing. Chains can be cut, hunger cannot be negotiated. She set the flour down and felt the weight of 2 truths sit side by side without fighting. Letters from former campmates began to find their way across the postal maze. Lotte wrote from a town where walls leaned on each other like tired friends. She had married a carpenter who could make a door from boards no thicker than faith. "We have a baby," the letter said. "He smells like soap and milk. We named him Jacob because names must start again." Another wrote that she had joined a women's sewing cooperative piecing coats from military blankets. They lined the collars with old scarf silk and called it fashion because names can rescue dignity when materials cannot. Anna answered in careful lines, news of her mother's health, the church kitchen, the day the street swept itself for the first time since the sirens. She ended with a sentence she didn't know she believed until the pen found it. "We will be more human than before." Work found Anna before she finished looking. The clinic needed hands that could fold, count, wash, and wait without scaring the frightened. She boiled instruments in a dented pot and learned the sound of clean metal. She kept a ledger, exact and square, because numbers are a way to hold on to the world. Sometimes at the taps she heard a tune from the camp cinema and stopped herself from humming. Memory can be kind and still feel like a betrayal. On late shifts she poured hot water into basins and watched steam briefly turn the room into a softer country. Patience relaxed as if the air itself promised rest. When the day ran long she took the diary from her apron and wrote 3 words as a test she kept passing. "Warm water works." Summer arrived unevenly, sun on one street, shadow on the next. The market reopened with stalls that sold more hope than goods. A man traded a violin for potatoes and then played on the curb to earn the violin back note by note. The city learned to applaud again without feeling guilty. News crackled from radios repaired with wire and stubbornness. Trials, treaties, lines on maps that moved slowly. People argued softly so they wouldn't wake the ghosts. Anna cooked thin soup richer with each conversation. To the pot she added a memory from the canteen, a pinch of sugar at the end to change the mood. At night she reread the page where she had written about the apple in the church hall. The crispness still echoed. She planted a tree in a yard that wasn't hers and asked no one's permission. Some promises you put in the ground and wait. On a Sunday afternoon she walked beyond the tram line to a field that had once been a park. Children kicked a rag ball and shouted rules that scaled with the ball's courage. A man sold postcards of the city. Before, corners unbent, roofs obedient. People bought them and did not look long. A stranger asked Anna if she had been in America. She said no and yes. He nodded as if that made perfect sense. "They say their camps were humane," he said, waiting. She let the silence measure them both. "They were rules made real," she answered. He exhaled, maybe relieved, maybe disappointed. Both are kinds of truth. When she returned home, the apple tree had survived its first afternoon. She tied it to a stick with string cut from an old uniform belt and smiled at the small, stubborn symbolism. Autumn again, and the clinic stacked coal neatly, counting sacks like treasure. The city babysat its warmth carefully, doors closed, curtains thick, kettles never quite cool. Anna's hands learned chapped as a season. She discovered that the opposite of cold is not heat but the ability to promise heat soon. A package arrived with an American postmark, a bar of soap, a tin of salve, a letter written in the chaplain's square hand. He wrote about a wedding at the base chapel and a baby baptized in a helmet because the family insisted on humor. Anna pressed the soap to her face. It smelled like memory reduced to essentials. She split the bar into slivers and gave most to the ward. "For the hands that keep the city alive," she told the nurses. The small pieces felt like fair shares of an undeserved mercy. Snow fell on the stacked bricks like forgiveness that doesn't ask questions. The clinic stove clanked and sighed. Between patients, Anna stitched mittens from a blanket that had once kept a soldier warm. She preferred objects with second lives. One night a boy with a cough drew a ship on the condensation of the window. 3 funnels, a line of portholes, waves patient and round. "Where does it go?" Anna asked. "Where the water is warm," he answered, and coughed again. She handed him a cup and thought about ocean engines that never coughed. She wrote in the diary, If I owe anything to captivity, it is the habit of refilling kettles. The sentence looked strange and exactly right. Spring returned, convinced it could win this time. The apple tree threw out honest leaves. The street swapped rubble for planters built from broken brick. Someone painted a door yellow and apologized to no one. The city's face changed by millimeters, which is how faces change. A market cart offered oranges. Real oranges. They cost too much. They were bought anyway. Anna carried 2 in her pocket for a week like delicate stones, and then shared them with children who had never peeled sunshine. The smell knocked the breath out of the room and replaced it with light. She saved the peels and candied them slowly, because waste is a language you can unlearn but should never forget how to speak. A reunion letter proposed meeting on a Sunday by the river. Anna almost didn't go, and then did. Lotte arrived with Jacob, who insisted on climbing everything. The women recognized each other by posture and then by laughter they had not permitted in years. They spread bread, cheese, a small jar of jam that made the bread behave like cake. They spoke of weddings accomplished simply, of funerals performed gently, of jobs that had turned into vocations because someone had to care and they were in the room. When it grew late, they exchanged addresses written carefully, as if the ink itself were fragile. If the tree bears fruit, I'll send you one, Anna said. Lotte laughed. If my boy finds it first, he will send you the core. At the clinic, a new doctor arrived, younger than the war and proud in the way careful people are proud. He listened more than he spoke, which made him rare and useful. He asked Anna about protocols and then followed them, which made him rarer still. He brought a radio that worked and music that remembered how to swing. On slow afternoons the ward learned to snap fingers softly. A nurse who had forgotten she owned a voice sang harmony by accident. Patients smiled more with their shoulders than their mouths to save energy for healing. The doctor asked Anna one evening, "What did captivity teach you that nursing school could not?" She answered without thinking, "To count kettles and blessings in the same column." Summer delivered a small miracle, the apple tree's first 2 fruits, pale green and shy. Anna staged a careful harvest with a chair, a handkerchief, and ceremony. She cut one into slim moons and carried them to the clinic on a plate. The slices browned fast and still tasted like the future doing its best. She posted the second apple to Lotte wrapped in newspaper and hope. Weeks later a postcard returned with a drawing of a child holding a core like a trophy. He chose the seeds for his pocket. The note read, "He says the tree will visit the river soon." That night Anna allowed herself to hum the camp's silly cowboy tune out loud. Memory had earned the right to make her smile. Years slid into their proper order. The city learned festivals again, modest, stubborn, bright with paper. A theater reopened its smallest stage and put on comedies because tragedy had been oversupplied. People laughed carefully and then louder, realizing laughter could be repaired like everything else. Anna taught at the clinic now, how to boil, to scrub, to wrap, to wait. She kept the diary in her bag to read the first pages aloud when a trainee asked why details mattered. "Because a bar of soap can end a war in a person," she would say, and the room would go quiet in a useful way. Sometimes she dreamed of America not as a place but as a temperature. She woke and filled the kettle and smiled at how many problems still answered to steam. On a clear autumn day a letter arrived with a foreign stamp and a photograph. The chaplain, older, still square, stood beside a plaque at a base chapel listing names of nurses, orderlies, and, unexpectedly, prisoners who had assisted in clinics while in custody. "We kept your first soap wrapper," his note said. "We thought it belonged in a drawer where gratitude lives." Anna placed the photo beside the diary. The 2 objects felt like a pair finally introduced. She traced the faces in the picture with one finger the way you touch a window before you open it. That evening she walked to the apple tree and thanked it out loud. Neighbors smiled and did not ask why. People in repaired cities understand gratitude spoken to practical things. Winter again, gentler now. Anna stood at the sink, hands in warm water, and watched steam cloud the pane. In the blur she saw a ship that had carried rules across an ocean, and a tiled room where shock had been washed away without speeches. She dried her hands, opened the diary to the earliest page, and read the shaky line she had written in fear and confusion. We expected blows and got soap. She added beneath it, steady this time, we expected nothing and learned to make promises. She closed the book and set it by the kettle. Outside, the apple tree kept its dark outline against the pale sky, strong in the way small faithful things are strong. Inside, the water hummed toward a boil, as it always does when someone who remembers makes ready for whoever might knock.